the KMNN studios, this is the Kids Morning News Network. It's November 27th, 2024, the 332nd day of the year. Welcome to the Kids Morning News Network podcast. I'm Alex in the KMNN studio. It is National Bavarian Cream Pie Day. Bavarian cream is a kind of custard that's actually from France. Bavaria is part of Germany, so no one's really sure how the cream got named after Bavaria. But the pie has a graham cracker crust filled with Bavarian cream and topped with toasted coconut. Graham crackers are American and coconuts are tropical, so Bavarian cream pie is pretty international when you think about it, and pretty tasty. With Thanksgiving tomorrow, I thought it would be the perfect time to dive into the story of Thanksgiving. We have a lot of international listeners, so this may help them understand what we're up to here in the U.S. First, let's set the scene. The Pilgrims, who sailed over from England, had just survived their first year in America, but it wasn't easy. The winter had been freezing, and many of the colonists didn't make it. But in the spring of 1621, they met a member of the Wampanoag tribe. They lived around there, and their name means people of first light, which makes sense because they lived further east than anyone around them, all the way out on Cape Cod, and they were the first to see sunrises. Anyway, this man they met was named Tisquantum, but he was also known as Squanto. He'd been treated very badly by earlier colonists, and it would have been totally understandable if he avoided the Pilgrims and let them keep making mistakes. But he didn't. He decided to help them. He taught them how to grow crops like corn, where to fish, and how to survive in their new home. Well, it worked so well that fall the Pilgrims celebrated their first successful harvest. And according to some accounts, the Wampanoag joined the Pilgrims for a 3-day feast. So what was on the menu at the first Thanksgiving? Well, it's not quite what you'd expect. Forget turkey with stuffing and pumpkin pie, those came much later. Instead, they feasted on what they had around them. Local vegetables like onions, beans, spinach, cabbage, carrots, and possibly peas were likely part of the feast. They also had corn, but it wasn't quite like the corn we eat today. This corn was ground into cornmeal and made into a thick mush or porridge. And squash. As for meat, historians think that birds like ducks or geese and maybe turkeys were on the table, and venison or deer meat. But the real stars of the menu might have been seafood. Yes, mussels, clams, lobsters, and even eels from the nearby waters. Imagine having lobster instead of turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. I'd actually be up for that. Mussels too, I love mussels. And what about dessert? Well, pumpkin pie wasn't possible yet. The Pilgrims didn't have ovens, sugar, or even wheat flour for pie crusts. Instead, they may have roasted pumpkins filled with milk, honey, and spices to make a custard-like treat. The Wampanoag also brought roots like turnips and ground nuts, and they likely shared fruits like blueberries, plums, and cranberries. This feast wasn't just about the food, though. For both the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag, it was a time to give thanks for the harvest and for survival. All right, let's head down under for an incredible tale about a very lost penguin named Gus. Gus is an emperor penguin, one of the largest penguin species in the world. Normally, emperor penguins live on the coast of Antarctica, but Gus somehow swam over 2,200 miles north all the way to Australia. That's like swimming from New York City to Phoenix, Arizona. He ended up on a sandy beach in the small town of Denmark. He's the only emperor penguin who is known to have swum that far. When he was found on November 1st, Gus was in pretty rough shape. He was underweight and understandably very tired. Luckily, there was a wildlife expert nearby who stepped in to help. She took care of Gus and even gave him a special friend, a giant mirror. Wait, what? Why a mirror? Well, penguins are super social, and the reflection helped Gus feel like he had a buddy during his recovery. And it worked. Gus gained weight, going from 47 pounds to 54 pounds. Still small for an emperor penguin. Healthy males can weigh over 100 pounds. But it was enough for him to make a safe return to the ocean. So just a few days ago, Gus was taken out to sea in a boat and released into the Southern Ocean. Now, summer is coming to the Southern Hemisphere, so it was the perfect time to return Gus to his natural habitat, where he could stay cool and thrive. All right, it's riddle time. Last week, my riddle was, where do you take a sick boat? Answer, to the doctor. Get it? All right, this week's riddle is, what is at the end of a rainbow? What is at the end of a rainbow? I'll give you the answer next Wednesday, but you've got to make sure you follow or subscribe to the Kids Morning News Network podcast so you don't miss it. Scientists are learning more about a deep-sea creature that might make your skin crawl, but it's also totally fascinating. I'm talking about sea spiders. Now, if you're not a fan of regular spiders, I hate to break it to you, they exist underwater too. But don't worry, sea spiders are not true spiders. They're actually related to both spiders and crabs, and scientists say they've been evolving on their own for hundreds of millions of years. Here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little creepy. Sea spiders have some truly bizarre features. First of all, their bodies are so tiny that most of their organs are actually stored in their legs. They even breathe through their legs by absorbing oxygen directly from the water. And their legs aren't just for walking or swimming or storing their organs. In some species, female sea spiders use their legs to carry eggs. But the weirdest part? How they eat. Sea spiders have a special tube called a proboscis, which they use to pierce soft-bodied animals like worms or sea anemones. Then they suck out the insides, kinda like drinking a smoothie.
Gross.
Yeah. Sea spiders live all over the world, from warm tropical waters to the icy depths of the polar regions. Some are as small as a grain of sand, while others can grow as big as a house cat. Scientists study these strange creatures because they've adapted in such unique ways over millions of years. And by studying sea spiders, researchers learn more about life in the ocean and how we can protect these amazing and often vulnerable ecosystems. If you were a kid in New York City back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, on Thanksgiving you might celebrate what was called Ragamuffin Day, where kids would go around and basically trick or treat. It was a big deal. They had parades, and by all accounts, the kids could be kind of annoying. Well, then in 1924, employees of a big department store, Macy's, dressed up in costumes and had their own parade that ended at their store in Herald Square on 34th Street. It was a huge hit. And pretty soon, the Ragamuffin Day parades were taking a back seat to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, or as we say in New York, the Macy's Day Parade. And if you've ever watched it on TV or in person, you know that the highlights of the parade are the huge balloons pulled along by teams of volunteers. The big balloons have up to 90 people keeping them under control. Well, if you're ever in New York City the night before Thanksgiving, you can go to the streets up around the Museum of Natural History on the Upper West Side to actually see the balloons being blown up. If you ask me, it's the best seat in the house. Have you ever gone for a hike and seen a Brocken Specter? Sounds like a horror movie, right? Well, it's not that bad once you know what it is. It's not a ghost. A Brocken Specter is actually a rare optical illusion that happens in the mountains, and it can make it look like there's a giant shadowy figure in the clouds. But don't worry, it's actually just your own shadow. Here's how it works. When you're standing on a mountain or in a high place and the sun is behind you, your shadow can stretch out really far in front of you. And if there is a layer of mist or fog or clouds, your shadow can fall on it. The water droplets in the fog scatter the sunlight, and that makes an illusion of this huge shadowy figure surrounded by glowing rings of light. So the name Brocken Specter comes from a mountain called the Brocken in Germany, where people have been seeing this phenomenon for centuries. Early on, hikers thought it was a supernatural being, but now we know it's just science. So if you want to see a Brocken Specter for yourself, you'll need the perfect combination of a sunny day, fog, and the right angle. So it's rare, but if you ever spot one, make sure to take a picture. All right, that's the show. Thank you very much for listening. Please follow or subscribe to the Kids Morning News Network podcast on your podcast player, your podcast app, your smart device, or whatever it is that you're using to listen to this episode. Happy Thanksgiving, my friends. I will be back next week, and I hope you are too. From the KMNN Newsroom, this is Alex signing off.